All right, let's jump into another deep dive. We're going to be looking at some U.S. political news today.
Okay.
But with a kind of interesting twist. We're working with a Korean language news broadcast transcript.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
It's interesting.
talk about getting an outsider's perspective, right?
Yeah.
It's not every day we get to see how U.S. news is being interpreted and discussed, on the other side of the world.
It's like holding a mirror up to our own system,
Yeah.
isn't it? We get to see ourselves through a completely different lens,
Yeah,
which can be incredibly insightful.
absolutely. And this transcript definitely does not disappoint.
Right.
3 major themes kind of jump out at us.
Okay.
We've got a major government shakeup, some ethical concerns that are being raised, and then some potentially seismic shifts in global power dynamics.
Yeah, definitely. And the first thing that really struck me was this idea of a government overhaul.
Okay.
And the transcript uses this phrase, our people, repeatedly.
Our people.
Yeah.
Huh.
Which seems to signal a push to replace existing civil servants
Right.
with those considered loyal to President Trump and his agenda.
Our people, huh? It does sound a little ominous.
Yeah.
I mean, how widespread could this actually be?
Well, the transcript highlights the fact that there are around 200,000 federal employees on probationary status.
Okay.
So essentially, these are new hires who haven't yet earned permanent positions.
Right, right.
And the concern is that they could be particularly vulnerable to this Our People initiative.
Wow, 200,000 people.
Yeah.
That's a huge number.
Yeah.
I mean, what kind of impact could that have on the government?
Oh, it could be massive.
I mean, we're talking about everything from the IRS to national parks, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It could lead to major disruptions in government services.
Wow.
Not to mention the chilling effect it could have on the morale of civil servants.
Right.
If people feel like their jobs are constantly at risk based on political loyalty, it could lead to, a decline in the quality of government work.
Yeah, I could see how that would be a problem.
Yeah.
The transcript mentions that the American Federation of Government Employees Union is pretty worried about this whole thing.
Right, they are.
They're seeing it as more of a power grab than a genuine attempt to make the government more efficient.
Right, and their concerns aren't unfounded.
Yeah.
We've seen similar tactics used by leaders like Hugo Chavez in Venezuela
Oh, wow.
and Viktor Orban in Hungary.
Right.
It's about consolidating power by controlling who holds these key positions within the government.
Right. So we've got this Our People initiative, potentially shaking things up.
Yes.
But the transcript also mentions Elon Musk leading something called DOCHAE,
Yes.
the Government Efficiency Department.
Right. DOCHAE's official mission is to cut the federal budget.
Okay.
But there's a lot of skepticism surrounding their true motives,
Uh-huh.
especially given the fact that DOCHAE's actual reach is pretty limited.
Okay.
They can only impact a small portion of the overall budget.
So why all the focus on DOCHAE then?
Yeah.
What are they doing that's raising so many eyebrows?
Well, one of the biggest concerns is their focus on agencies like the IRS,
Okay.
where they've been given access to a massive amount of taxpayer data.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That does sound like a huge red flag.
Yeah.
And didn't Senator Ron Wyden publicly express concern about this?
He did. And some experts have even linked DOCHAE's activities to the delays and tax refunds that many people experienced this year.
So wait, are we saying that DOCHAE could be deliberately slowing down tax refunds?
Well, it's not entirely clear,
Okay.
but it definitely raises serious questions about potential conflicts of interest
Right.
and a lack of transparency surrounding DOCHAE's actions.
Right, because, I mean, Elon Musk is a highly influential figure
He is.
with his own business interests.
Absolutely.
So giving him access to this kind of data without proper oversight is...
It's definitely concerning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider the broader context
Right.
of this whole Our People initiative. It makes you wonder if DOCHAE's actions are part of a larger strategy to exert control and potentially target political opponents.
Exactly. And it's not just speculation either.
Oh.
The transcript mentions that 14 states have actually filed a lawsuit challenging DOCHAE's authority.
14 states?
Yeah.
Wow.
Citing concerns about overreach and abuse of power.
That's a pretty significant pushback.
It is.
It seems like a lot of people are worried about DOCHAE's potential to disrupt the balance of power within the government.
Absolutely. And it's not just about power struggles either.
Okay.
The transcript also highlights some serious ethical dilemmas arising from all of this.
Okay.
Take the case of Daniel Sussman,
Oh, right.
a Manhattan federal prosecutor who resigned in a protest.
I read about that.
Yeah.
He was ordered to drop a bribery case
He was.
against New York City Mayor Eric Adams, wasn't he?
That's right.
And he felt like the order was politically motivated?
Exactly. He believed it was an attempt to shield a political ally of prosecution.
Right.
And he refused to be a part of it.
Wow, his resignation letter really resonated with people.
It did.
I remember that line.
Mm-hmm.
To be a public servant in America right now, You need courage.
Yeah, it's a powerful statement.
Yeah.
And his case, along with the resignations of several other Justice Department lawyers,
Right.
speaks to a growing sense of unease within the government.
Yeah.
Civil servants are being forced to make these really difficult choices
Right.
about how to navigate this new reality.
Right. Do they cooperate with these new directives?
Yeah.
Even if it means compromising their values?
Mm-hmm.
Or do they resist and risk their careers?
Exactly.
It's a tough spot to be in.
Absolutely. And this ethical dilemma isn't limited to the Justice Department.
Okay.
The transcript even mentions USA.
USAID, I wouldn't think that they would be caught up in all of this.
Yeah.
I mean, they've always had a reputation for being nonpartisan
Right.
and focused on humanitarian work.
Exactly.
In fact, didn't Melania Trump champion their work
She did.
during her time as First Lady?
She did, yeah, but despite that, USAID has become a target for DOCHAE.
Really?
Facing funding freezes and program disruptions,
Wow.
it seems no agency is immune to the reach of this Our People initiative.
That's alarming, isn't it? This whole Our People philosophy just seems to be permeating every level of government.
It really does.
It's creating this sense of uncertainty and fear.
Absolutely, and it's raising serious questions about the future of American democracy. If
Right.
loyalty to a particular leader or ideology
Yeah.
becomes the primary qualification for public service,
Right.
what happens to the principles of fairness,
Yeah.
impartiality, and accountability?
Okay, so we've got this massive government shakeup.
Yeah.
Elon Musk being DOCHAE, stirring up controversy.
Uh-huh.
Ethical dilemmas are popping up everywhere.
Yeah.
But the transcript also mentions some growing tensions between the U.S. and Europe.
Yes.
How does that fit into all of this?
Well, it seems like President Trump's America First approach
Right.
is creating some serious friction on the world stage. It really seems to be alienating some of America's traditional allies.
Okay.
The transcript points to three main sources of tension.
Okay.
We've got ongoing trade disputes,
Mhm.
disagreements over who will dominate the future of artificial intelligence,
Right.
and then President Trump's approach to dealing with Russia and Ukraine,
Okay.
which many European leaders see as just dismissive of their concerns.
So it sounds like there's a lot of distrust brewing.
There is.
But what exactly is driving these tensions? I mean, haven't the U.S. and Europe always had their disagreements?
They have, but it seems like things have escalated under President Trump.
Okay.
He's repeatedly accused Europe of taking advantage of the U.S.,
In what way?
both economically and militarily.
Okay.
For example, he's demanded that European nations increase their defense spending to at least 5% of their GDP.
5%.
5%.
That's a huge jump
It is.
from what most European countries are currently spending.
Yeah.
No wonder they're pushing back.
Exactly, and they argue that they're already facing significant economic challenges.
Yeah.
The transcript actually highlights the fact that Europe's GDP per capita has been shrinking relative to the U.S. for the past 30 years.
So they're being told to spend more on defense,
Right.
while also dealing with a relative decline in economic power.
Exactly.
I can see how they'd feel squeezed.
Absolutely, and this resentment is creating an opening for other global powers,
Like,
particularly China.
okay,
The transcript actually quotes an analysis from The Atlantic
okay.
that suggests some European nations might start to align themselves more closely with China
Yeah.
if they feel alienated by the U.S.
Wow, that's a pretty sobering thought.
It is.
So President Trump's America First approach could actually end up pushing Europe away
Potentially.
and strengthening China's position on the world stage.
It's a real possibility, and it highlights the interconnectedness
Yeah.
of domestic and international politics.
Right.
The decisions being made in Washington about things like government staffing and budget cuts, right, can have ripple effects that are felt around the world.
It's kind of mind-boggling when you think about it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, we started this deep dive talking about Our People and Elon Musk,
Right.
and now we're talking about the potential for a major realignment,
Exact.
global power.
It's all connected, and these high-level political battles
Yeah.
have very real consequences for ordinary people,
Of course.
both in the U.S. and abroad.
Right. And the transcript does touch on some of those more tangible impacts.
Yes, it does.
For example, it mentions that several states are struggling to fund important initiatives
Right.
because of federal funding freezes.
Yes, Arizona and Washington were specifically mentioned as examples.
Okay.
Both states have ambitious plans for renewable energy and environmental protection,
Okay.
but those plans are being hampered by a lack of federal support.
And what are the consequences of that?
Well,
I mean, beyond just those specific projects being stalled.
right. Well, it could mean job losses in those sectors.
Wow.
Higher energy costs for consumers. Right. And a slowdown in progress on climate change mitigation.
Okay.
And that's just one example.
Right.
The transcript also mentions potential cuts to Medicaid,
Right.
which would impact millions of Americans who rely on that program for healthcare.
And let's not forget about the ongoing trade wars
Oh, yes.
that President Trump seems so fond of.
Right.
The transcript mentions that those are still a major point of contention.
They are.
Not just with Europe, but with other countries as well.
Right. Those tariffs and trade barriers are disrupting global supply chains.
Right.
And increasing costs for businesses and consumers.
Yeah, it's a very complex issue.
It is.
With far-reaching economic implications.
Absolutely.
And then just to add another layer of complexity, the transcript also mentions the resumption of TikTok downloads after that temporary ban.
Oh, right, yeah.
It seems like even social media isn't immune to these political tensions.
It's a reminder that these power struggles are playing out in every aspect of our lives, from the government agencies that serve us to the apps that we use on our phones.
It's a lot to take in.
It is.
So we've got this government influx, a controversial figure leading a cost-cutting initiative. Ethical dilemmas are popping up everywhere.
Everywhere.
And global power dynamics are shifting beneath our feet.
Yeah.
Where does that leave us? What does it all mean?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Yeah. It really does feel like we're at a crossroads, doesn't it?
It does, it does.
We've got all these, forces pulling in different directions. And it's hard to predict where we'll end up.
This deep dive has uncovered some pretty concerning trends.
Yeah.
I mean, we're seeing a blatant attempt to consolidate power.
Right.
A willingness to disregard established norms and institutions. And this growing sense of unease about the direction things are headed, both domestically and internationally.
Yeah.
The whole our people philosophy is especially worrisome.
It is.
It's like we're moving away from a meritocracy.
Right.
And towards a system where loyalty trumps competence and experience.
And that has huge implications for the effectiveness of government, for the rule of law, and ultimately for public trust in our institutions. If people feel like the system is rigged, that it's only working for a select few, it erodes the very foundation of democracy.
It's like that sense of fairness and equal opportunity is being chipped away little by little. And what's scary is that it's happening on so many levels.
Exactly.
We see it with our people. We see it with DOCHAE's activities. And we even see it in the way that the U.S. is interacting with its allies on the world stage.
It's a pattern of behavior that raises serious questions about the long-term consequences.
Yeah, we talked about the potential for disruption,
the
erosion of trust, and the risk of alienating allies.
Yeah, but what does it all mean for the average person? How will these political shifts actually play out in their everyday lives?
That's the question that keeps coming back to me.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, global power dynamics are fascinating. But how does it affect someone who's trying to pay their bills? Put food on the table, plan for their future?
That's where the rubber meets the road, And I think we're already seeing some of those impacts. We talked about potential cuts to Medicaid, the stalled progress on renewable energy projects, and the rising costs due to trade wars. These things have a direct impact on people's wallets, their access to health care, and their overall quality of life.
It feels like there's this disconnect between the political rhetoric and the reality on the ground.
Absolutely.
It's easy to get caught up in the big headlines and the dramatic pronouncements. But it's important to remember that real people are being affected by these decisions.
Absolutely. And one of the key takeaways from this deep dive is that we can't afford to be passive observers. We have to be informed, engaged, and willing to speak out against policies that we believe are harmful or unjust.
That's where the courage that Daniel Sussman talked about comes in.
Exactly.
It's not just about grand gestures or heroic acts. It's about making choices in our daily lives that reflect our values and holding our leaders accountable for theirs.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we all have a role to play in shaping the future. Whether it's through voting, contacting our elected officials, supporting organizations that align with our values, or simply having informed conversations with our friends and family.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener.
It has.
And I think it's left us with more questions than answers. But one thing is clear. We can't afford to be complacent.
The decisions being made today will have a profound impact on the world of tomorrow. It's up to each of us to stay informed, stay engaged, and keep asking those tough questions.
Well said. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes, thank you.
Stay curious and keep exploring.
It really is a pivotal moment in history, isn't it? This deep dive, we've covered some pretty concerning trends.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I mean, we're seeing a kind of a blatant attempt to consolidate power.
Right, and just a willingness to disregard established norms and institutions.
Yeah, and just a growing sense of unease about where, where things are headed, both domestically and internationally.
Yeah, I think the "our people" philosophy is especially worrisome to me.
It is very worrisome.
It's like we're moving away from a meritocracy.
Exactly.
And more toward this system where loyalty trumps competence and experience.
Right, and that has huge implications, for the effectiveness of government, for the rule of law, and then ultimately for public trust in our institutions.
Exactly. If people feel like the system is rigged, that it's only working for a select few.
Right.
I mean, it erodes the very foundation of democracy.
It really does.
Yeah, it's like that sense of fairness and equal opportunity that we value.
Absolutely.
Is being chipped away, little by little.
Little by little.
And what's scary is that it's happening on so many levels.
It is, yeah.
I mean, we see it with our people.
Right.
We see it with DOCHAE's activities. And we're even seeing it in the way that the U.S. is interacting with its allies on the world stage.
It's this pattern of behavior that really raises serious questions about, the long-term consequences.
Right.
I mean, we've talked about the potential for disruption, the erosion of trust, the risk of alienating allies.
Right.
But what does it all mean for the average person?
Yeah, how will these
political shifts actually play out in their everyday lives?
That's the question I keep coming back to.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, global power dynamics are fascinating.
They are.
But how does this affect someone, who's trying to pay their bills, put food on the table, plan for their future?
I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road, right?
Yeah.
And I think that we're already seeing some of those impacts.
I think so, too.
We talked about potential cuts to Medicaid,
the
stalled progress on renewable energy projects, and the rising costs due to trade wars.
Right.
I mean, these things have a direct impact on people's wallets, their access to health care, their overall quality of life.
It feels like there's a real disconnect between the political rhetoric.
I agree.
And then the reality on the ground.
Absolutely.
It's easy to get caught up in the big headlines and the dramatic pronouncements. But we have to remember that real people are being affected by these decisions.
Yeah. And one of the key takeaways, I think, from this deep dive is that we can't afford to be passive observers.
Right.
We have to be informed, engaged, and willing to speak out against policies that we believe are harmful or unjust.
That's where the courage that Daniel Sussman was talking about comes in, right?
Yeah.
It's not about, making these grand gestures or these heroic acts.
Right.
It's about, making choices every day that reflect our values.
Absolutely.
And holding our leaders accountable for theirs.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we all have a role to play in shaping the future.
Right.
Whether that's, through voting, contacting our elected officials, supporting organizations that align with our values, or simply having, informed conversations with our friends and family.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening.
It has.
And I think it's, left us with more questions than answers.
Right. Yeah, it has.
But one thing is clear.
What's that?
We can't afford to be complacent.
The decisions being made today, are going to have a profound impact on the world of tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it's really up to each of us to stay informed, stay engaged, and keep asking those tough questions.
Well said. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes, thank you all for listening.
Stay curious and keep exploring.